All right. Hello and welcome back to Tantrums and Tangents, the talk show. Joining me is Saberwolf.
Hey guys.
And yeah, we've been sort of going on this kick recently where we're talking about sort of different classes and RPGs that you'll find in video games and in tabletop games. And today we wanted to talk about Clerics and Paladins.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we talked about barbarians and then we talked about thieves, and I figured this is a good one to cover too. But yeah, so
Hey.
like clerics and paladins are very interesting. I find them in most RPGs to be a very interesting mix of well, if you're talking paladins, it's a very interesting mix of being a knight and also being somewhat magic. And a cleric is basically an alternative way to use magic too, because basically what they both do is they basically get their power from something higher up, some higher being or belief. But yeah, it's pretty cool because there are certain rules in certain RPGs where you can't necessarily wear heavy plate or wield certain weapons and use magic. Whereas these guys are like, oh, it's fine, wear heavy plate
Right.
and smite the shit out of something.
Smite it in the name of our God.
Right. But yeah, they're very interesting characters, paladins, and you know there's a lot of stuff out there. It's like paladins are the goody two shoes, and you know they're the white knights, and they don't have to be. So we're gonna sort of be exploring that today, where you know the typical cleric and paladin sort of tropes in most video games sometimes don't apply.
Right.
And that makes things a bit more interesting, especially when you have conflicts of interest within your own character as a paladin or cleric.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, one of the so like if we're talking typical like cleric paladin like gods, you pick some god that is good, which automatically makes your character like lawful good because you have to follow the tenets of your god.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to like be aligned with them because it wouldn't make any sense to follow, I don't know, Bahamut, the good dragon god, like in Dungeons and Dragons, which like who like is about like war and battle and honor and justice and all that good shit. But like it wouldn't make sense if you were a follower of Bahamut and you were lawful evil.
Right.
Like that wouldn't like make any sense for your character. Like why are they evil? But anyways, that aside, yeah, that's like the typical thing that I think of when it comes to like paladins and clerics and stuff. Somebody who's playing like, you know, a lawful good character.
Mm-hmm.
But there are all sorts of there are all sorts of religions in specifically Dungeons and Dragons where the alignment of your god is not lawful and is not even necessarily good.
Right.
Like there's in like the I think it's in 3.5, and I can't remember the name of the god right now. But like there's a god that is like straight up the god of law. Oh, wait, my bad. It's not the god of law. I was thinking of somebody else. It's the god of justice. And the god of justice in this 3.5 like deity was just neutral.
Right. That makes sense. Right.
Yeah. So like, yeah, because like because justice as like this construct in the mind transcends law, right? Like it doesn't matter what like people's laws say. Like two different countries can have a completely different lawful stance on exactly the same issue and deal out completely different types of justice for it. Right. Like in a barbarian society, like theft might be punishable by death, but in a thief society, like theft might not even be considered something unlawful at all.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. There's sometimes they have like in RPG cultures they have the thing where um, you steal something, and if you're caught stealing, you give the guy like a trick penny or something like that, like some like hilarious recompense because you caught me like stealing or tricking you. And it's just
yeah,
our
yeah.
society where we're like, ha ha ha, we trick and steal from each other all the time.
Right, right. Um, but yeah, like this god of justice, that whom I cannot remember the name of, um, like there is an actual, like the assumption is that there's like a paramount, like people at times are wronged and you have to fix it. There's a natural order of things that you need to keep straight. And like it does not matter who is right or who is wrong. Whomever is the wrongful party needs to make recompense, right? So
And like
like
playing a character like that, like if you're playing a paladin of that justice god, like you could get into some serious shit.
especially with your party.
Right. Because you're righting the wrong, so to speak, but maybe the wrong's like done by a really good like altruistic dude.
Yeah. Like
Like Robin Hood, you would kick his ass
right.
if you were a justice. Because you
Well, you
wouldn't
see,
care he's stealing.
right, right. But like but the thing is that like the god of justice would probably recognize Robin Hood as like a saint because the sheriff is really the person who is wrong.
Oh, okay, so it actually knows how far to go back in the chain?
I mean, yeah, right? Like cuz it's about because like what a person who is like a like a justicar or a paladin of this justice god would come along, see Robin Hood and be like, "Why are you stealing?" And then Robin Hood would say, "Well, the sheriff of Nottingham is like wronging the people." And then this paladin, let's call him Justice Man, says says, "Huh, I see." And then goes and talks to the sheriff of Nottingham and says, "Where do you get all these taxes from?" And he says, "Well, the people, of course. It's to keep them safe." Safe from whom? That brigand Robin Hood. I see. So, and then it's then up to the Justice Man to go ahead and like figure out, like which way his god would side, right?
Right. You know,
Like,
it is interesting though, thinking about it, because if you think of a paladin in like sort of that god of justice sort of thing,
right.
there's a dude in like full plate armor with most likely some sort of giant sword on his back asking you about the goings on in a town.
Yeah.
I don't care how high that guy's charisma is, I don't think anybody's gonna be lying to him.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know. I feel like some people would try to lie to him, or at least they would feed him a version of the truth which they believed to be accurate, but he would this justice man would like figure out what the truth of the matter was, right?
Right.
And then this is like a great this like leads directly into this thing where like that's the traditional picture of like paladins and stuff, but like any person who is faithful to something might be considered a cleric or a paladin, right? There's a game that we've played not even terribly long ago called Dogs in the Vineyard,
True,
which
right?
is about these effectively kids. They're like 16 to 21 typically, who are charged by the church of their area, and they go out into basically the Wild West with their six shooters and their rifles on their horses to like go out and make sure that things are good in the in like, you know, the area, the territory. And when things aren't good, they make sure that the wronged parties are righted, and that the people who are bad get dead.
You know, it's actually really interesting, the whole thing with clerics and paladins, because there is this whole thing. And hey, how's it going, Esparto? But yeah, there's this whole thing where when essentially you think of a party, right? You have a paladin, that's your moral compass, And that's a very interesting thing, that basically you have a traveling moral compass with you, who just, like, out of their own, like, nature and the way that they serve their higher power, they fix problems wherever they go.
Yeah. It's actually really cool, like, to have it be that way. And, like, weirdly, a lot of times, like, people who are playing, like, clerics and paladins, like, end up becoming, like, the de facto leader of a party, even if they weren't intending to.
Right. They don't, you know, yeah, they don't necessarily plan to, but they're the ones that need to ask more about a situation to understand it fully, and they need to sort of make decisions on what's right and what's wrong. Yep. And it's pretty wild. I mean, they're basically like a wandering judge, jury, and executioner.
Right. And like, the only stipulation about that whole thing is that, like, the thing by which they are judging you is not necessarily the law of the land. It's by their own religious ideology.
Right.
Which
can clash horribly with whatever the locals are.
Oh, holy crap, yes. Like...
Right, yeah, like people who play Oblivion. Imagine being a paladin and going into Hack Dirt, the small town where they worship the Deep Ones. I bet they don't need any help. But the paladin thinks they do.
Oh yeah, they fucking do, man. I'm gonna help the shit out of them.
Of course, help the shit out of them means I'm going to basically either slay them all or remove them all from underground and destroy the passages that lead to the Deep One's whisperings.
Yep.
Essentially destroying their religion.
Right. But that's the thing. Their religion is the wrong one.
Right. If you're a paladin, you make those decisions. Yeah.
Right. And the same is true of clerics, too, right? Like,
we haven't talked a lot about clerics. We've been referring to paladins a lot.
Right.
Hey, Sergeant Jordan, we're talking about clerics and paladins today, and sort of their roles in RPGs, and all kinds of, like, crazy sort of like stereotypes that they're caught up in, and sometimes they break them, and we're investigating that. So,
right.
But yeah, we were talking about paladins most of the time, but clerics can also be badass. Like,
right.
Maybe they don't necessarily have full plate, but they can be in some pretty, like, heavy, like, robes and stuff like that are pretty well armored.
Right.
And they usually have weapons that are, like, kind of wild in comparison to paladins. Like, they sometimes have flails, battle staves, you know, and they might have, like, a battle book or something.
Yeah, they can be like priests of the element.
Yeah, priests of the eternal fire. Right.
Yeah, man, like, that's a real thing.
Yeah. And in The Witcher 3, man, they basically say that any magical thing is wrong, thus they have to destroy it in the eternal fire.
Yeah. Now, like,
it's basically glorified witch burning.
Right, for sure. But yeah, like, it actually comes up as as sort of like a minor distinction. You've got clerics, and then you've also got priests, right?
That's true.
And, like, now, priests are usually the ones who are walking around in, like, roby things. Like, they're more about, like,
spreading the word. Right.
Clerics are more about enacting the faith.
Yeah. Which is why you normally see them more heavily armed than a priest would technically be.
I mean, because you send a cleric into a wild area in order to bring your god's light to that place, right?
Right.
As opposed to, like, a priest who you would normally see in, like, a civilized area, sort of upholding the like, the tenets of the faith and stuff,
right?
Right.
And a bunch of other guys in hoods following you around.
They can be Esparto, but there's a little bit of a thing there. Like, paladins are actually, like, in terms of classically, like, where they fall in the clergy, paladins are like the clergy's knights. So usually you're trained as a squire to a paladin to eventually be raised. They're usually called, like, acolytes or something.
Right.
Or like a page. I think they're more likely to be.
But
called.
I guess you could always be a cleric and then want to progress into paladin. It would just take a little bit of extra training.
For sure, especially because some clerics get used to a slightly more cushy lifestyle than paladins are.
Right, Sergeant Dornan. Right. They did that whole thing because they tried to the mages of the lodge tried to assassinate kings, right? So it makes sense. They're sort of that became a sort of belief after that fact, and
Right. And like there's some stuff that gets really sticky about like the belief structures of different gods in like fantasy settings, especially when you get into like polytheistic ones, because the question ultimately becomes like, whose domain do you honor in any particular place, right?
Right, true, because it becomes a very strange thing, because you're a priest or a cleric, you believe in one thing, you go to another area, and they believe in basically the opposite stuff that you do, and you either have to, just be like, they're heathens, but I'll just, I'll clench my fist and hide it away. I don't have to fight anybody, but like, it's a huge point of tension for them.
Sure is. Especially when they start doing things like, so there's like levels that you can be heretical, right? You can be a heretic because you believe something different, but you don't actually do anything about it. Like you just worship differently than me. Okay, fine. I guess I can let you worship this god in this weird way because I don't know why you would, but that's just the way you've always done it. Sure. But then you get to things like gods of like gods who are considered to be good, and like gods who respect life and things like that. And then say your church is like heretical to my church vein, and mine is like all about good and honor and like respect the living and all that good jazz, all that hippie shit. But your god is like brutal and like requires blood sacrifice and etc. Right?
Right.
And, like very very Aztec.
And he's like a good god because he protects us all.
Exactly. And he shows you the way to like wage war on your enemies and keep the land safe and grow prosperous throughout the lands. It's just that every like quarter moon he requires 5 virgins to be sacrificed, right?
Right.
So
but for protection and glory in battle, like it's a good trade-off. Right.
Right. So if I'm in your land and you're about to sacrifice 5 virgins, do I want to invoke the ire of your entire army because it is the right thing to do? It depends on how zealous I am, right?
Right. If you're like, I'm going to do this for glory, then you're going to do it. But if you want to survive another day, you're not going to do it.
In fact, what I will probably do, because I play the smart paladin, is to come in, assess the whole situation, take note, and go, I see, and try to save as many people as I possibly can by retreating, getting my whole church to come and rain hell upon you.
Right.
Rain heaven upon you.
Correction, right. Friggin' A.
Yeah. So like that's that. Like there's but like that's the thing. Like whenever you're including a lot of like religious tension in your game, it ultimately like boils down to this thing where where eventually you get into a holy war.
Right.
Which isn't bad. It's just different than most games usually turn out.
And of course, it's always great when that holy war is within your own party, when you have two people that believe in two like opposite gods.
Oh yeah, that's the shit.
Right.
So like we've been talking a lot about like or at least just in this section we've been talking a lot about like gods of like good and evil and like this whole thing. But I actually kind of like some of the gods that have like these weird tertiary things that are like important for like just living or particular ways of life. Like there's gods of like the harvest, right? And like there are some people who devote their entire like life to the god of the harvest. Right. And like, what would a paladin of the harvest look like? I can only imagine they carry a big fucking scythe, and that ain't badass.
Right. That like, there's sometimes you think, oh, a paladin, they're a goody fucking two shoes. They can really be badass. Like, right, like the praising the god of a harvest. You might have like some giant sickle. You might even have some like minor plant growing abilities.
Right.
Because that's one of the other things that we haven't really talked about, but like the powers that are given to a cleric or a paladin, they can vary so much depending on what you're faithful to.
Exactly. And sometimes there's like weird overlaps. Like a god of nature and a god of the harvest probably both have similar like magic powers, like spellbook options.
Right.
But they're also probably very different. Like
right. Because one's about like prosperity and like
goodwill, feasting,
right,
like,
and the other's about like getting along with everybody and like respecting nature and stuff like that. And like, you know, a god of the harvest might be like, destroy this forest, I need another field.
Right.
And that's when like you'd think similar like, you know, harvest versus nature gods would actually be okay, and then they'd like clash heads at that point.
Right. And then you get into this weird thing. What?
What? Oh, you're talking about Far Cry 5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's clerics or paladins in that game.
Right. I mean, to be fair, like you wouldn't necessarily expect like someone like a paladin or a cleric in the Old West, but you know.
That's true. I mean, well, actually, one of the things that me and Saber were talking about before the stream is technically, if you think about it, the guys from Supernatural are paladins, right? They're basically monster hunters in a way, but they do all kinds of rituals to banish spirits and clear the land of evil. And like, they're not the typical dudes in armor with a claymore. They got shotguns, salt, gasoline.
Yeah. Yeah, whip out the lighter fluid, toss it on the ghost.
Right, right.
Oh man, like
it's sort of you don't think of them, but they're basically paladins. They don't actually. Right. It's kind of weird. They don't have a higher power though. Now I'm thinking about the definition.
Right.
But I guess the belief is that there's evil that needs to be cleansed.
Correct.
And so you can go with that it's not some higher power. It's a belief in you can make the world better by killing every evil thing you come across.
Exactly. Like it's a belief in this higher order that people need to be protected from the things that they don't know about.
Right.
And that it's their job and it's nobody else's. That's what takes them over the edge.
Oh, right, yeah, Darth Gandalf.
Oh yeah, no, that's spoilers. That's real.
Yeah. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but I expected something similar to happen anyway.
Right.
But yeah, you know, The Witcher is actually very similar in that fact. I mean, he's not the traditional paladin, but he does go around. You know, he believes in the fact that there's monsters and humans that deserve some sort of like goodness in the world, and you know, he has to basically like balance out that there's good monsters, good humans, evil monsters, evil humans, and has to sort of go ahead and take care of that, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Like,
because I mean, when we're talking about it, usually like when you're talking about monster hunters, it's a black and white situation. In The Witcher, it's not so much. It's pretty gray. Because there are humans that could be way worse than a monster.
Right. And so to get on a tangent real quick, that's actually one of the things that's funny about this other role-playing game that we've been playing recently, Monster Hearts. Mm-hmm. Like, two of the like directives of that game for people who are running it, like, are to make the humans seem monstrous and to give the monsters like make them relatable, right? Like they're just people too.
Right. By the way, Monster Hearts, for those of you who don't know, is basically like High School Monster High, but it's really, really cool.
It's one of the best games that has been written within the last 10 years, quite frankly. Widely accepted as like one of the top 5 games that has come out. But anyways, not to like get on that train. But yeah, no, it's a fun as hell game, and it's got a lot of cool things to say about like what the nature of things are and like how tough it is to not only be a monster but to be a teenager, which, as far as like the writer is concerned, aren't actually any different.
Right, right. That is the funny part about that
Right.
whole thing.
I mean, like, okay, so I guess I will hop on this discussion a little bit for the tangent part of it. Like, so you've got these playbooks that like they're character classes. They're called skins in this game, and like one of them's like the vampire, and then you've got the werewolf, and like all these like regular types of things. But then you also have like the infernal and the ghoul, and like a whole host of other like things. The idea is that each of these monsters embodies something that's true about being a teenager, and that part where this character whom you are playing, who is like obviously monstrous and generally like not worthy of like continuing life, is just a kid. Like they're just teens, like all of us have been in our lives, right? And it's just one of those weird things where you can sort of relate to this thing that is considered to be bad or like destructive. Again, like teenagers.
But yeah, that's a really cool thing, because yeah, that's a huge thing that clerics and paladins have to sort of make a distinction about, is what is actually monstrous.
Right. And like I think that's one of the things that The Witcher has done really, really well. From what I've been able to catch of it, I haven't been staring raptly every hour of like the entire playthrough. But like just that there's this line that they have where sometimes you're not sure who the bad guy is in any given situation in The Witcher.
Mm-hmm.
There are some times when it's like it is obvious who the bad guy is,
but sometimes it can be really misleading.
Right. And like honestly, the one thing that I've actually really enjoyed about watching you play The Witcher, Ving, is like when people are like, oh, we need to stop this big scary monster from doing all this bad stuff to the people. Like Geralt then goes out and investigates and comes back and is like, okay, so the humans fucked up.
Right.
And got themselves in this shit, and now they want me to fix it.
Right. Because, of course, one of the things that I guess, The Witcher and clerics and paladins have to worry about a lot is people blaming things they can't explain. Right. And sometimes it's just the misunderstanding of someone did something they weren't aware of and fucked shit up.
Right. And like, yeah, like people make mistakes.
Right.
And that's just a thing that like comes up occasionally in storytelling and things. I don't think it comes up nearly enough considering how much it happens, but it comes up a lot in The Witcher.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that kind of actually like leads us back a little bit to the yeah, that's right, Darth Gandalf. It would be a problem for clerics more often than for paladins, because paladins are sent in to deal justice, not to...
Right, yeah. Clerics, yeah, you don't think of them as violent as the paladins. The clerics solve a situation based on whatever they, like, higher power they follow.
Right. And like to put like a fine point on it, like generally speaking, if we're talking mechanically in a game, you're usually going to be considered more of a cleric if you have more spell power, and more of a paladin if you have more martial power. Like
right. So there's like a balance there.
Yeah.
The more spells you have, the more cleric you are. The more swords you swing, the more paladin you are. Not numerous swords, although that would be kind of cool. Just some dude who infinitely has a sword and he just like flies out and like the battle ends and there's just like people wading through like ankle deep swords.
That'd be so funny.
They disappear after like 3 days or so, but like
right. But yes, Darth Gandalf. Yes, like the paladins are the gun.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Or the sword, depending on what we're talking about.
Right, legit. But but yeah, like that's always like an interesting distinction to sort of like recognize between the two. Um, because like clerics wear heavier armor than most other classes, and like they also carry some like pretty cool weapons, like you said earlier, like flails, mauls,
War
like usually
staves,
big, yeah, usually like big blunt weapons. Like
Mhm.
it's something you can smash things with.
It's their gavel,
Right.
symbolically or maybe literally.
Yeah, right. Oh man, there was that game.
That was hilarious.
Bing and I played a game called Masks, which is about like superheroes who are teenagers. We play a lot of games where we pretend to be teenagers because we're old. But no, there was a scene where they were in like a corporate building that was run by superheroes, and one of the lawyers turns like we figured out was actually a superhero named the Gavel, and he just like pulls out like he turns his briefcase into a hammer and just goes to town on the people they were fighting. It was
But like
really
he totally just looks like a lawyer.
right.
That was the best part, seeing this friggin' guy. Holy shit.
Oh, and we like pulled out all the terrible puns for that. That was so good. Oh.
Hey, Scott
Oh, man.
Socrates. Good almost midnight to you. It's only almost 6 for us.
Yeah, for real, man.
That's pretty wild. But you know,
Oh.
one of the things I want to focus on now is the magic that clerics and
right.
paladins have, because we've talked about sort of the sort of decisions they have to make and their roles in a RPG party, and sort of they're forced into certain things. But like I want to talk about their magic, because their magic is sometimes the like most badass thing about them. Because that's
Yeah,
the cool
right?
thing is most of the time when you're wearing heavy armor in an RPG, you don't have the option to use magic. There's something stopping you.
Right.
And when you're a cleric or a paladin, nothing stops you.
Yeah. No, that's fair. It's because of like the source of your magic, right? Like wizards and warlocks and like sorcerers and stuff, like they rely on like heavy training and like the ability to like articulate their fingers and say pretty mouth words and stuff in order to make their spell work, right?
Right, they have a little satchel with eyes of newt and all this other like components and stuff, and they've poured over tomes for like 3 days beforehand or something.
And before that, even like years learning how to control the magic and to like manipulate the arcane building blocks of life.
Right.
Tell you what, man, clerics and paladins got it easy. They just gotta pray for it.
Right. All they have to do is do a little bit of, they meditate, they reflect on the teachings of whatever higher power they have, and then bam, like they've got like some crazy like solar smiting god, and all of a sudden you go into battle and you're like frickin' holy fire, and like everywhere it's just like frickin' everything's on fire, and ghosts are being like burned and banished, and some good stuff.
Right. And like, yeah.
Right. And like that's all it takes. And then, you know, after the battle, you know, I did a good job. Thanks for helping me out. I'm going to need a little bit more help on the next thing I do. Bam, there's my spell.
Right. Yeah, like yeah, right. And that's true, Socrates. Like it's I guess the power of Christ compels you. That's a good one, Dark Gandalf.
Right. But no, it totally makes sense though, because essentially if you're a wizard, right? Your power comes from your knowledge. It takes years and years to develop that stuff. You're a paladin, it's taken years and years for you to basically like pray to this this higher being. But like you get that power instantly.
Yeah. Like that's just
Oh,
the
did
way
I
it
accidentally
is.
talk over you?
Oh, it's all right.
Oh.
Dude, it's your show. I'd rather you have the priority.
But yeah, that's how Google Hangouts works. It basically, if we had a third person on, it would actually cut out and then switch to the other person's camera. But yeah.
Right. but yeah, like there's something really interesting about the way uh like clerics and paladins like get their spells. And like the thing I like about it the most is that it's so flavorful towards like the god that they
Right,
like
because
worship.
you could be anything from like the goody goody two shoes, frickin' I'm the, cleric or paladin of frickin' fairy princess magic, or you could be the cleric or paladin of frickin' the lowest lord of the pit who consumes all. That's who you believe in, and that's who you get your power from. So you go out there and frickin' eldritch tentacle everything.
Yes. We've definitely been in those positions where eldritch tentacling is a thing that you do to people in our games. And like, I know that sounds really funny and sarcastic when I say it,
No,
but
it's
that's
horrible. It's horrible. The frickin' frost damage, and psychic damage sometimes.
Should I whip out the book and like?
Oh, whip out the book and find that spell, because that is hilarious. But no, it is like paladins don't have to be good. Clerics don't have to be good either. They could both be evil.
Right.
And in fact, sometimes evil parties are really interesting to play with because it's a totally different dynamic.
It really is.
We need to consume the world in evil rather than we need to spread our goodwill.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's you'd think like the spreading of goodwill versus devastation would be similar in theme, but it's very different. You have to do totally different things to sow terror as opposed to like bring light.
Right. I mean, because like when you're saving somebody, all you have to go do is go and defeat their enemies. Like that will make you a hero to them. But like in order to make yourself a villain, you have to like go in, subvert their way of life, enslave them, like unleash a horrible monster upon them, like make sure that they know you did it.
Right.
It's just a completely different way of like approaching a thing. Now, like I'm cool with it because I run lots of games. I know how to like sow terror, but like
right.
You know, that's just a thing. It's just a different way of playing. Honestly, whenever I am playing, I like to play really good characters because I don't get to a whole lot.
Right.
But the to get back to that thing that we were talking about, the spell is called the Hunger of Hadar, and for the Hunger of Hadar, you open a gateway to the dark between the stars, a region infested with unknown horrors. A 20-foot radius sphere of blackness and bitter cold appears, centering on a point within range and lasting for the duration. This void is filled with the cacophony of soft whispers and slurping noises that can be heard up to 30 feet away. No light, magical or otherwise, can illuminate the area, and creatures fully within the area are blinded. The void creates a warp in the fabric of space, and the area is difficult terrain. Any creature that starts its turn in the area takes 2d6 cold damage, and any creature that ends its turn in the area must succeed a dexterity saving throw, or take 2d6 acid damage, as milky, otherworldly tentacles rub against them. And it spells like this that really make me excited about Dungeons & Dragons.
Right, like that is badass. Like, holy shit. And I mean, upper level cleric and paladin spells can basically be like frickin' spears of light. Like, when you get to higher level crap, you like friggin' godly sigil on the ground and then just holy light goes waboosh! And just like, it's almost like a reverse nuclear blast or something.
Yeah.
Except it's like, it doesn't hurt anybody that's good. It's just the evil dudes who just like get turned to ash.
Yeah. Actually, one of my favorite spells is in 4th edition D&D. It's like, I think it's like a 5th level cleric spell or something like that. Anyways, what you effectively do is like you like pray to your god and cast like their sigil upon the ground, and like it's like spreads this area around you that heals your party and does like life damage to undead.
Right, yeah, because that's a huge thing sometimes where healing spells work well on people, but actually harm the undead.
And if you have
the same way around, you could also be like a necromancer or evil thing, where harm heals your zombies.
Yeah.
And damages people.
Is cast like an area necrotic damage thing, and it heals your like undead creatures and like withers the party that you're trying to like kill. That's always rough. Like,
right.
If you're fighting somebody who has that trick that you have, but in reverse, especially when the odds are already so against you anyways, that is automatically like that guy is the biggest dick you've ever met in D&D.
Right, exactly.
And as far as us playing at some point, Bakura, I mean, I think we're intending to at some point.
Right. I've just got a lot of schoolwork, and it's tough for me to carve out extra time to do stuff, but
that's legit. I'm cool with that. Like, just, you let me know if you're ready to run or if you need me to run or whatever.
Right, yeah,
we'll do that.
It's definitely something we want to do, because I think it'd be a lot of fun. We'd probably devote an entire day to it.
Legit.
Because it only makes sense to.
Yeah. The only thing is that I don't know that Poison would be willing to like say that she'd want to come and play, because her schedule's weird because she works in retail.
Right, yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll figure out something like that eventually. But yeah, I've been into D&D since middle school. Although what's funny is I only played like one game, and then I was hooked for life, even though like I didn't play again till like college.
Right, dude.
Because you always get those situations where, all right, let's set up and play a D&D game, and you play it one time, and then nobody's schedule works ever again.
Right.
And it's a sad thing that happens.
Yeah. That happens like way more often than I want to admit.
Right.
But people who are like, yeah, sure, I'll play D&D, like show up and like they don't understand that like when somebody says, hey, you want to like play D&D with me, you're meaning until we're not friends anymore.
I was not expecting that. All right.
I mean, I don't literally mean that stopping playing D&D with somebody would end your friendship, right?
No. It's not like Monopoly.
But like you're asking them for like a long-term commitment, and they don't necessarily know that.
Right, exactly.
Like which is one of the reasons why I've gotten like, at least as far as I'm concerned, like super chillax about people who only want to commit a little bit to play D&D.
Right.
Like, you guys just want to play like one night? Sure, I've got like a first level dungeon that I've like sat on since forever. Why don't we just play this thing?
Right.
You need to die now. Thanks, Darth.
That's when you ruin families with like Monopoly night.
Right. See, that is a game that will ruin friendships.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah, no, for sure. I not in person, but like I have tertiarily spoken with Adam Coble like a lot of times. I follow him around on a whole bunch of social media and shit, and I occasionally have access to him. If anybody wants, not right now because they're not actually playing, but Roll20 has a Twitch channel, and Adam runs the games there. They're playing a game called The Sprawl, which is about cyberpunk, and they have a little like they have one of their corporations is Disney Bezos, and I designed the logo they have for it. So you can see a tiny bit of me on the Roll20 stream.
That's pretty cool.
It is actually pretty cool. I like it. And yeah, no, I hear Court of Swords is really cool. I haven't actually like stopped to like catch up because there's a whole lot of backlog. And I hate the way JP like makes his like only an hour of the game available every day, because god damn it, I want to see it all. Like I want to binge it. But no, that's my personal hang up. I usually just wait until the weekend when it's all on. But anyways, enough about that bullshit. We're back to Clerics and shit.
I mean, it's good to talk about D&D since, this is pretty much primarily what we're talking about.
Right, no, for sure.
I mean,
because
we've
like
also applied it to Supernatural and The Witcher. But, you know, there are
right,
clerics and paladin classes in Oblivion.
right. I mean, that
That's
makes sense.
that's totally a thing. You focus on restoration magic. You have your heavy armor.
Right.
I mean, in certain cases, the restoration magic can even involve absorb health, which is kind of cool sometimes.
Right.
But like, it is one of those difficult things.
But yeah, man, like it's one of those things, and like I actually get really irritated when games are like, oh yes, there's holy damage. I'm like, what the fuck is holy damage?
Well, actually, interesting thing you mentioned that, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't it usually banish ghosts and evil things?
Right.
But then again, you bring up a really good fucking point, though. How does holy damage know what's evil?
Right. And like there to answer that question.
Boom!
Right. Yeah, actually, yeah, you have to go back into Dungeons and Dragons, into like the history, in order to understand why there's things like holy and unholy energies and stuff. And it's actually about, in first edition Dungeons and Dragons, like good and evil wasn't really a thing. Like it was, like you could be good or you could be evil, but then you could also be lawful or chaotic, but you couldn't be lawful evil. You could only be evil or lawful.
Oh, so they didn't have that mixture in the first edition.
Right. Because there were certain things that were in the world that were brought there, whatever that turned out to be. But like the entire thing, that the entire reason why that's a thing anyways, is because like Gary Gygax and everybody who was like involved in creating D&D originally were coming out of like war skirmish games, and they just needed some kind of bullshit alignment, like some reason for things to be allied with each other.
Interesting.
Most notably against you.
Right.
But yeah, like that's where that whole thing comes from. And yeah, Bakura, like Elder Scrolls generally takes a lot of inspiration from tabletop RPGs.
Oh yeah,
Probably
take a look at
because the guys
Daggerfall and Arena.
Yeah.
Like it is pretty much D&D the video game, as it were, in that period of time.
Yeah, exactly. And like the thing is that the gaming like world, like in terms of like tabletop gaming and like video gaming, as they've sort of diverged over time, have become so distinctly different that I don't think you can really go back to a time where it makes sense to like actually have a game that is like strictly speaking simulationist of a tabletop game and have it seem fun.
It's definitely interesting. Like Neverwinter Nights is one of those games that's basically like a D&D simulator.
Right.
And there are certain other games too that sort of do like sort of an isometric RTS sort of way to sort of do that. And it's it can be very fun, but like it does have the tendency to get very clunky.
Right. And like at some point it stops, in my opinion, it stops being fun for what video games are, because like video games are like fast and dynamic, and you want to be able to like react to things really quickly. Like with a role-playing game, part of the thing is picking the right thing to do. That sometimes takes time. And having that ability to just take a little time really changes like the pacing at which the whole game runs. It's just a thing. Like you got video games nowadays don't really like that, unless it's like a turn-based strategy game, right?
Right.
Which ultimately is what tabletop games are.
Right.
But that's kind of what makes Morrowind like a weird fish.
A weird fish. All right. Yeah.
Sorry.
All right.
I'm a little into it, but still.
But yeah, right,
like,
Elder James, about the holy damage thing. And how's it going, JJ? We're actually like 3/4 of the way through our talk show.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So yeah, you're good. But yeah, it is interesting to try to combine the two. Because you can definitely have, like, I mean, when we play tabletop games, me and Saberwolf, like, they're like 15 to 30 minute spouts of time where we're talking about stuff like just planning what to do next, or just talking about bullshit that has nothing to do with the game. And and you know, it's very difficult to sort of have that like planning time in a game without being like, the game's paused for like 10 minutes. What are you doing with your life?
Right. Topic is clerics and paladins, and sort of right now we're talking about like magic, but we've kind of tangented off into how do you make a game like a tabletop game in a video game.
That's why it's called Tantrums and Tangents, the title of our talk show, because we tend to either go off topic or get really involved in some other thing that we're very heated about or something.
Right. But also, as far as that goes, Elder James, like the whole holy damage and everything, like I fundamentally am aware that it's like good aligned damage. And I mean, like, and the same would be effectively true of like unholy damage, right? Like it's bad energy and it's what hurts you. But like that's where you kind of fall into like this weird thing about like immunities and stuff, because that's a big thing for clerics and shit too, right? Like you've got certain types of enemies that are immune completely to certain types of damage because it makes sense. Like you would not want to hit a fire elemental with a fireball,
right?
Because that's dumb.
It is.
But at the same time, depending on how the magic in the whole system works, whether or not it's sort of like an aligned energy, or if it's actually like physical substance, you may or may not want to throw, I don't know, like a cone of cold at a fire elemental. Like maybe they're like so elementally fire that like the opposite of that is like ice is like overpowering and destructive to them. But perhaps because they're made of flame, ice cannot touch them, right?
Right, like they're so intensely hot, it just turns to water vapor by the time it gets to them.
Yeah. And like that's one of those things that makes like elemental magic like particularly weird.
Oh yeah, because essentially you get what? Fire, you get fire, lightning, and ice are your typical things. But then, like, things can get out of hand, and then you start getting earth and water. And then you get light and darkness, and then holy and unholy, which are not light and darkness because they're not the same thing. And then you have to ask yourself, what am I doing with my life?
Right.
Because, like, how are they different? Like, because sometimes you do have those.
Right. And then you've also got like different damage types and stuff, which falls into the exact same category. But like in Dungeons and Dragons, you've got acid damage and poison damage, which are not the same.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting.
But yeah, like...
And what's funny is all these elements we're talking about, like, a cleric or paladin could use any of these depending on who they align themselves with.
Right. And like... So like a cleric of a thieves god would more than likely have powers that were associated with like darkness and poison. But they might also have but like additionally they may also have like a negative zone of truth or something like that, where like you force people to tell lies. And they may or may not be aware that it's a lie at the time they do it. Like they might be charmed into thinking that they're telling the truth. Like it's one of those weird things.
I would love, Bakor, what you just said there. I would love to have a D&D game where there were extra elements as atomic and celestial.
That's pretty good. I do like atomic as a power source. It's one of my favorites. But like I also am kind of into like the whole like atomic punk thing that pre the end of everything Fallout was.
Right, yeah. I mean, an atomic sorcerer would honestly... Well, I kind of did that, actually, didn't I? The siege mage basically turned into an atomic sorcerer near the end of the playthrough.
Whoops. Right. You like pull out like a vial and you pop it open and you throw it out in the air. It's just uranium dust and you blow through it and it turns like shoves out like this green smoke or whatever and does atomic damage instead of like poison damage, right?
Right. It's different.
It's different. It's specifically atomic.
Right. Oh, my bad. I filled your house with 1,000,000 rats by sneezing.
Oh, no. Yeah, I mean, that's legit. Kill everybody. It's okay. They were sacrificed to your great atomic lord.
Oh my gosh. Adam.
Right.
Holy crap. Clerics and Paladins of the post-apocalypse. If we're talking about that, the children of Adam are like the Zealots are the Paladins and the Clerics are anybody else, really.
Yeah, that makes sense. I buy that. That's totally Paladins to me, man.
Yeah, they do. They believe in the Great Division. The fact
Dark
that
Gandalf. I didn't do anything. Don't worry. They'll eventually get cancer.
Oh my gosh.
Oh man, that's great, Gandalf. I love that.
The creeping killer. Right, Picor, friggin' A. Yeah, that's why you don't want to eat atomic food, because otherwise you fart atomically. No atomic burritos for me.
Nope. I don't think it's the atomic that's giving you the gas, man.
But no, it's actually fairly wild. Just like this, Clerics and Paladins are just... We think of them as stereotypes, but at the same time, there's a lot of other things that apply to them. Right? Because, I mean, we go from Children of Adam to The Witcher to Supernatural, the TV show, and they're all basically some variety of Cleric or Paladin, because they have some sort of belief or higher power that they either think is backing them or is actually backing them.
Right. And, like, I very much enjoy this idea that, like, there are like modern paladins or clerics, right?
Right.
Like that there's and not in like the strictly like actual real world religious sense, right? Like actually people who like are but like in like gaming and fiction, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's people who there's people who are devoted to a cause and have particular training and then are sent out to do the Lord's work, whatever the hell that means in the setting in particular. And, like, they get themselves into some weird situations. And, like, I dig that. I like it a lot especially when players, like, are, like, devoted to the idea that they are devoted to a god.
Mm-hmm.
Like, somebody who's willing to like go the distance to like actually make poor choices and like do the wrong thing specifically because their god tells them they need to do that thing. It makes the game so much more fun.
Mm-hmm. But
because
on the other hand, sometimes the great fun can come from a fallen cleric or paladin, one who believed in their higher being so much and then came across a situation that changed their life, and they realized they made the wrong decision in whoever they followed, and they had to renounce their ties to them.
Yeah. Who was it? There was a game I was watching from a group of players called they call themselves Indie Plus. They were playing Dungeon World, and one of them was playing a paladin. Her name was Graves, and Graves was following the tenets of her god, the Lord of the Sun, basically,
mm-hmm.
and she did everything the Lord of the Sun told her to, and like without fail, nothing would stop her, and she kept getting fucked over time and time again because she just couldn't roll right, man. Like every time she would roll, she would get like the worst result possible, and it was just like so bad.
Oh my god.
At some point, Graves gets surly about having to do her god's work. She still does it faithfully, but then after a couple more sessions of this same bullshit, and then her god asking too much of her, she was like, fuck you. and she went straight like dark paladin like immediately, and like
Wow.
she didn't know who to turn to. And like that was a thing that struck me really strongly, that this person who is like so incredibly capable had no
Right.
purpose without their god.
Right, like
There's no heroine in that game.
but no, like no, totally. Like if a cleric or paladin abandoned whatever higher their power gave them power, there's a huge hole in their life.
Right. They
Like
no longer
even
have
though
access to their
they've
power.
been yeah, even though they've been capable and they've been killing monsters and casting spells and all this sort of stuff, they've lost a huge part of themselves, and sometimes they even lose magic, depending
Right.
on the lore or RPG you're using.
Right, for sure. In Dungeons and Dragons, like if you fall from like grace with your god, like if you go against their tenets, like you lose all access to your like powers until you redevote yourself to the same god or to a different one.
Right, right.
And sometimes if you redevote
that's a
yourself
huge
to
thing
different
too,
god, you have to
'cause
start all over.
right. And sometimes the best evil paladins come from that background. The fact that they've fallen from like a good higher power, they were lost, confused, didn't know what to do with that big hole in their life, and they filled it with something dark. And they didn't even realize it was consuming them until it was too late, and now they can't stop themselves.
Hilariously, same game we were talking about earlier, Masks. Terraform has almost fallen into that trap.
Right, right.
Because Terraform's like, yeah, I'm gonna like uphold goodness and make sure that people are nice to each other, and I'll make sure that there's balance between the natural world and people. But as Terraform's story has unfolded, she's come to find that people suck,
Right, right.
and that the people she comes to rely on, she can't rely on. And like when she needs comfort and balm, the only person who helps her is her god.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to know how far I can push Terraform before she realizes that really people are the problem.
Oh gosh, Esparto. You throw that in the wash immediately, man.
Oh god, no, like get rid of that.
No, like throw that in the wash, because holy crap, milk. Do you think it went away with a paper towel, and then you smell it the next day?
Right. Yeah, no, that's terrible. Get rid of it.
But no, Darth Gandalf. That's very interesting. I'll have to think about that. But yeah, Lucine Luchance would be a cleric of Sithis, if you think about it. From Oblivion, or from the Elder Scrolls, just the Dark Brotherhood, Morag Tong. They have this belief in, like, basically the Void, an assassin, god. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Right, correct.
Oh, interesting.
Right, no.
James, huh?
Elder James, Oath of Vengeance is fucking awesome. I fucking love Oath of Vengeance. Yeah, no. There's a few other oaths that have been released in like Unearthed Arcana. But like, yeah, no, I like it. I really dig the way Paladins work in 5th edition. Poison is actually playing this character that we're going to eventually come back to, a paladin who has sworn. It's not the Oath of Vengeance. It's one of the other ones. I think there's 2 others, and I can't remember exactly what they are. I'd have to look it up. But she's not like she hasn't fallen to like the she hasn't like started to fall to darkness or anything. But yeah, no, I do like Oath of Vengeance a lot. There's a lot of like, or maybe it's Oath of Protection I'm thinking of. I can't remember now. It's been so long since I've read the Paladin rules. But yeah, one of the Paladin builds lets you like interpose yourself between yourself and like enemy threats. So somebody is about to stab your best friend who's in the party, and you're like, fuck that shit, and you like step in between and you take the damage for them.
Yeah, that's some cool stuff.
Like there's some really cool shit. It's suboptimal in terms of like your character's own like life, but at the same time, as a paladin, you've got more HP than them most likely.
Right.
Because first, you're harder to hit because you're probably wearing plate, or at least half plate.
Right.
And you can carry a shield, unless of course you're a badass and you're wielding a two-handed greatsword.
Actually, one of my favorite things in games, and it doesn't happen too often, is when you get the real badass who can wield 2 tower shields as a weapon.
Right.
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 It's just shield bashing all day.
Right. Shield dash day in, day out, man.
And impromptu sledding.
Right, of course. You always got to impromptu sled. Especially if it's down a mountain face. Rock sledding.
Rock sledding.
Man, you introduced me to that idea. That was like a dwarven sport in the first game we were ever going to play.
That's true, right. I got that from a Magic the Gathering reference.
Oh, okay, cool.
There's a rock sledding goblin, I believe. And what's hilarious is it's not actually using a sled, it's using another goblin as its sled. So the effect was pay a certain amount, sacrifice a goblin, and it gains like haste and +1/+1 or something.
Sweet. I think I vaguely remember that card, honestly.
It's pretty awful because like you see like the other one, he's got like his foot on his head and there's like a rock like bouncing against the other goblin's nose and he's like making a horrible face.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I think if I can't remember. Like I have this vague notion that the card was illustrated by one of my favorite artists for Magic, but I can't remember for sure.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. But yeah, man, like I don't know. There's a whole lot of really interesting like ground for clerics and paladins to infest in your like D&D campaigns and anything really, right?
I mean, it's actually pretty amazing. I mean, based on like, you could start a game, right, and be like, I want to cast freaking acid spells. You could be a paladin.
Right.
I want to cast ice. You could be a paladin. I want to do dark magic. You can be a paladin. I want to summon great, powerful gods. You can be a paladin. Like, it's actually kind of interesting, like, the amount of magic you can do. And it is all dependent on what higher power they're all devoted to.
Right. And then you've got this weird sort of middle ground between, like, paladin and cleric and a whole bunch of other stuff. Like, there are, there's almost this place where like super zealous druids are almost like paladins for nature, right? So
yeah,
like, depending on how you go about like looking at it, but yeah, like, and then like we've said, like supernatural, right? Like the Winchesters are basically like paladins in a lot of ways.
You brought up something interesting earlier about Geralt, and Geralt is actually kind of a ranger when it comes to D&D classes, and it's actually sort of a mix if you think about it.
Right. He's multi-classed for sure.
He's definitely multi-classed, yeah.
If we're playing Pathfinder, he's definitely got like a couple of levels of alchemist in him.
Right. Simple magics, but it's based on intense training and other poisonings.
Right, for sure. But like at the same time, like that simple castings and things, right? Like the devotion that and I use that word intentionally, that Witchers have to like their training and like understanding and all that stuff leads back into that like paladin cleric thing, right? Like it's not because they believe in the magic or any of that shit, but they believe in their training that they've done for so long that they have the ability. I mean, and also magic's real in their universe, in like their setting, right? Like that's just how that works. But not everybody can just use magic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you got to learn, like, from the basics all the way up until you're a master, like Geralt is, and he can just, like, wave his hand a little bit and, like, make incredible things happen.
Right.
Like, but, like, that same thing is exactly what it's like when you're a cleric. Like, you don't have to memorize your spells. You just fucking do them.
Right. And your training's not as much like sword play as it is praying.
Right.
And meditating on the teachings and whatnot.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that go on in there.
But yeah.
Right. I mean, that's also true, Bakura. There's a 70% chance that you're just not good enough. But, like, who's to say that there's not, like, that those odds aren't represented similarly in, like, cleric or paladin training, right? Like, maybe 70% don't die, but, like, they can't actually cut it as, like, a paladin or a cleric, which is why it's such a prestigious position.
Right. Yeah, and then like, yeah, if you can't be a cleric or a paladin, you're like an acolyte, or you're just some simple altar dude.
Acolyte, priest, like you're just a devotee to the church in some way or another.
Mm-hmm.
Like, up on your faith, and you don't necessarily die unless of course your religion is particularly metal.
Right. So yeah, we were talking about that earlier, Wessel. Yeah. And the difference I find is paladins begin as martial knights. They do a lot of combat, and they're devoted to whatever higher being they're called to, and they come from a knight or sort of melee background that sort of gain power through their deity. Whereas clerics, they start off with the whole praying and rituals and doing stuff for their higher power, and then sort of work their way into the martial setting because they need to beat some sense into the people who don't believe him.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, and to address that, Bakura, like, yeah, like, that's true, but at the same time, like, just because, like, most of the world wants you to not be there doesn't necessarily mean that you aren't important to the world. And point of fact, nobody wants to fight Geralt or any of the Witchers because they're such badasses. Like, nobody wants any of that. Like, and like, in a lot of cases, that's the same for, like, paladins and clerics. Like, they're such big badasses because they're players or they're player characters usually, and that means that they have levels, and 95% of the world doesn't. Like, you don't want any of that unless, of course, you're like somebody who would notice these people, which means that you're of similar level, and probably also a huge badass. Like, that's why you end up with, like, in games, that's why you end up with a like, running into people who are like about the right level to fight with, so, like, whom actually give a shit enough about you to fight.
Right, yeah. In Lister and Bakura, yeah, of course. There's always the exceptional dumb bandits who think, oh, you're just a normal dude, I'm going to attack you. Or, your armor looks so awesome, it'll look better on me.
Right. And also, like, let's not, like, get confused or get it twisted. The Witcher's a game. Like, it would be cool if at some point things that were lower level than you would start running away from you. But let's be fair, that's just not a thing. Like,
no, totally.
Like,
I've always
different that way.
I've always said that it would be interesting that at a certain point your badassery gets so intense that people see you and they run away.
And like,
but at the same time, that's another weird thing where you have to make your way up to the intimidation. You have to have like legends and stories about yourself. But there also could be the other end of maybe you never get to fight anybody ever again because you walk a lonely road and everybody runs away from you.
Right. But I mean, like, in like tabletop role playing games, this thing that you guys are saying, like, we'll tell that to the NPCs, they won't fight you anymore. Like, if you're fighting an NPC in like a tabletop game, like, you might, like, some bandits might jump you guys in the woods, and then you like kill one of them, and everybody else like stops and goes like, whoa, whoa.
Right. Because either they didn't expect you guys to be such badasses, or they're cut and run.
Yeah, like that's a thing that happens. Like they run away.
Mm-hmm.
Like
you don't see that too much in video games, but RPGs you see that a lot.
Right. Well, no, and you're right, Lister. It doesn't mean that everybody will run away from you, because like there are people who are similar tier to you, right? Like, and yes, Elder James, that's like a very good way of like eloquently putting the two different classes in ways that make sense for people who play games, right?
Right.
But right, like there's got to be a compromise. And like, if you don't get to feel like a badass in The Witcher because you can kill level 1 NPCs in like a single swipe, and like they were stupid enough to fucking try and take you, like, that's just that, right? Because they don't necessarily know. Like, to be fair to the setting in which they live, they're bandits. They don't know Geralt of Rivia by face. They may have heard stories of him and know that he has white hair. And like, smart NPCs would not necessarily attack you, but these people are desperate.
Right.
They're off in the middle of the woods. Most of the time they're nearly naked. They've deserted their army.
I have fought people who are actually just in their underwear. It's hilarious.
Right.
And they have like a blackjack. Like, that's their weapon. They're attacking me with a club in their underwear.
And like, and some of them are in their underwear with like a helmet on, right?
Right. Like, that's gonna make a difference.
Right.
My name is Jared, the helmet-wearing, underwear-wielding motherfucker, and I'm gonna end you. and then you just gotta facepalm and realize that guy is actually serious.
Right. But not only is he serious, he's serious because of his life position, right? Like, he has no other choice. If you rat him out to his commander, his like former commander in the army, they're gonna fucking find him. They're gonna bring like a troop of guys. They're gonna subdue him, and they're gonna fucking hang him from a tree.
Right.
There is no good option for those level 1 NPCs in The Witcher.
I feel bad for... Let's all just have a moment of silence for those level 1 NPCs that were all lost. And that's enough.
Oh, jeez. But yeah, man, like, it's just one of those things. Like, Wessel, level 1 feels bad, man. That's good. That's good. But yeah, like there's just some things about video games that like don't make sense.
I think that would actually make an amazing topic.
Things in RPGs that don't make sense?
Yeah, let's do it. Well, let's make that a topic for a different week.
Another week? Yeah, sure. All right, I'll like write it down. Actually, I'll like write it actually down. Give me a sec.
Cool. But yeah, I think we'll stop there for the day.
Cool deal.
I feel like we've said it, as much as we can say about Clerics and Paladins, and
I mean, yeah, we're starting to like get pretty off topic.
Right? Yeah, that's when I know.
Right. Wow, Wessel, that's an intense emotion that you're having right there.
It certainly is. But yeah, so we'll stop here for the day. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put on the standby screen and change the title of my stream. And yeah, I think either next week we'll talk about wizards, or we might actually talk about like funny tropes of video games that like always frickin' happen.
Right. Sure, that makes sense.
So we'll see what we feel like next week, unless you guys really feel some way about it.
Right. Let's see.
But we'll get that sort of account next week sometime.
Right.
All right, cool.
I don't know. I guess like a shameless plug, if I may. Like at some point during the next week or so, I'm actually going to go live and like do like game discussion stuff for like designing RPGs and things on my channel. So anybody who's interested, twitch.tv/saberwolf no e will like I'll be doing that sometime this week, probably over the weekend, most likely. Yeah, so that's my plug.
Cool. Awesome. Orcs in different games
Thanks,
too
Wes.
would be pretty hilarious. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so
I mean, we could
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I hope you guys
could totally do.
yeah.
Go for it. Sorry.
You were talking about the orcs. I mean, we
Yeah.
did a discussion on basically like our favorite creatures and dungeon ecology and stuff, but we could always focus on like just the sad life of kobolds or orcs, goblins, and other dumb green minions.
That'd be great. I honestly love that. Oh, poor kobolds. They get such a shit life.
Actually, I feel like that's one of the RPGs we should play is No Country for Old Kobolds.
We should play No Country for Old Kobolds.
It's the best. That shit is the funniest.
It's so good.
Alright, anywho, I'm going to switch to the title screen, and I'll be back with The Witcher 3 in just a second. So hang in there, and we'll be back. Thanks for joining me, chat, and thank you for joining me, Saberwolf.
No problem.
Alright, and I'll be back in just a second.